Hello and welcome to my channel. I am Adam Salah and I am discussing Microsoft Loop, and as many uses, it's truly a Swiss Army knife in my toolkit. I am excited to share my tips and tricks and the many ways I use it in my work. Today we're going to focus on an end-to-end process of creating a workspace, how to add and organize pages, and dive deeper into the different components that you can insert into a page and their use cases. So without further ado, let's get down to it. First things first, you need to create a workspace, and the way we go about it is you land at loop.microsoft.com or you use the Loop client. Whichever way you go about it, the content will be in the same place, and it's just a matter of the client. The difference between the desktop app and the web app is really nominal. The main difference is you won't have these tabs and browser related functionality. All right, whichever way you get to it, you create a new workspace by simply selecting that and then typing a name for it. The objective of this particular workspace is I'm going to use it primarily for this lecture, which I'm numbering, lecture 6, and I'm going to use it to create organized content that touches on so many different things. I could start by adding content that I already have. I'm just going to go start with a net new blank workspace, and in there what I get is a single page here. The workspace is created, and if you have seen my earlier sessions, again, this is the breadcrumb that shows you where you're at, especially if you start drilling down and creating subpages, as we'll see shortly. So I'm gonna call this my lesson plan, and that renaming takes a few seconds and is reflected over here. I am gonna add a new subpage. So you can see here I created a new page that is indented underneath this one, and then I have a drop down that shows up, or a downward pointing arrow here that says, hey, you have subpages in there, right? And again, in the navigation, you will see I have untitled lesson plan lecture Miss Loop lecture 6, and in here I'm gonna call this one outline, and I call this one exercises. So as you can see here, outline, exercises, 2 blank pages, lesson plan, another blank page that has been created. Now a few things. What I'm going to do here is for my lesson plan, I'm going to start with the introduction, and then I go into workspace, and then pages, workspace. And here you just click on the underlined. If you get that red underline, it could be a suggestion like here saying, hey, maybe this should be a heading, or it could be a misspelling like I had here when I missed the K in my typing. You will notice that it says, hey, this is not a correct word. The difference there is one will be dotted and the other one will be a squiggly connected underline, which means it's a mistake or a typo that you can correct. You will also get that if you plug in a technical term or a foreign language word that's not recognized by the proofing tools. So I'm going to go workspaces, pages, and so on. That is how you would go about adding content. And you notice I made that into a heading. I could right click here, I'll get a different menu as I mentioned, which has these options. You could underline, you could italicize, you could also make it into a heading, right? I'm going to show you another twist on the headings, but let's say here introduction, this will be intro to Loop, and go in the workspace and say discuss creation of workspaces, and in here dive deep into the main thing. I am considering the pages to be the main thing, which contain components, which is going to be the next natural topic. Discuss components, creation, sharing, etc. And I'm going to go back here and I'm going to make this into a heading. It says, hey, maybe you should do this, add a dot at the end of etc. So it gives you very helpful hints and tips as you proceed through the authoring process. Now here's one that I really like to do. As soon as I start creating a content, dive deeper into each section, I like my space to be a bit neat. The way I organize my content is by simply clicking into this and holding the Control-Alt down and hitting a number between 5 and 7. So 5, 6, 7. If I go 7 here, you'll see that it automatically created a collapsible region for me, an accordion for those of you in web development. If I do 6, you'll see it becomes heading 2. If I click 5, I'm still holding down the Control-Alt together, it becomes heading 1. So heading 1, 4, 5, 6, heading 2, 7, heading 3. And because I chose this to be heading 2, I keep the Control-Alt down and hit 6. I'm going to do the same for this one here, Control-Alt-6. And this one here, Control-Alt-6, and you can see now I can focus on the first one. I'm also going to make that into heading 2. I'm going to go ahead in here and start filling the gap, right? So in here I'll say intro to loop, sing its praises, etc. Right? So you start filling this up here, and I'm gonna go ahead and hit that key, the /. You can also, when you hover over the cursor or thereabouts, you'll see this plus sign. This is one of those new things that was added, you can see, to help us insert components in there. So whether you use / I love the keyboard, obviously old-fashioned, but you can also use your mouse and pick one of these down here. And by the way, collapsible heading 1, 2, 3 are the ones that I just showed you, but if I were to select it from here, you can see that it turned that into heading 2. That is also got a collapsible region. I'm going to insert a checklist to say, hey, sing his praises, badmouth it, and then maybe if we were in an interactive session, we would have a QA involved in there as well. Because I left this out of the checklist, you can see that it still says intro to. Here we will go detailed discussions. Something like that. I'm winging this. I did a bit of planning and I'll show you the actual course outline that I created for this, but the process that you can use to go through the thinking process and organize your thoughts around it. And because it is a Microsoft product, very similar to Word and Excel, you can simply select something, Control-C, copy it, Control-V, paste it. That will create a copy, or you can simply grab one, Control-X, it's going to delete it, cut it for you, but it is still in the clipboard, and you can go ahead and paste it above this one, and you'll notice it's smart what it did. Because this is a collapsed region, I went ahead and pushed this and dented it to the right as if we were a child of this new parent that I plugged in there. And I do Control-Z on my keyboard, or Control-Z for my American friends, and it's gonna go and remove or undo the last action. So Control-Z to undo, Control-X to cut, Control-C to copy, and Control-V to paste. Or you simply right click here, and as you would expect, undo, which is Control-Z, Control-Y to redo, Control-V to paste. If I were to select this and right click, you'll see the rest of the options come to life as well, and that is the Control X and Control C. Very basic stuff, but worth mentioning in case you are new to the environment, right? So that is how you start organizing your content. The primary takeaway here, really, if you haven't used this tool, is this. I really love the idea that you can create collapsible regions to organize your content, so you have this nice, clean, much more readable page, if you like. What if you already have content that you're happy with in another workbook, and you want to bring it in here to save you some time instead of going through all these new creations? There are two ways to go about that. The obvious one, which you may already know, is this. You can come in here to the page and say Control A, which selects everything, right? If I go Control A, select everything, and then Control C to copy that and go back into what I just did. Now, you can click on the MS Loop Lecture 6 workspace and in here say Control V. It takes a little while, as you can see, because this is a heavy set of content, and it brought it in here and done, right? So that's one way to go about it. However, if you intend to duplicate an entire page, there is another way to go about it, and that is to go to the source workspace, select the page that you're interested in, and say add to workspace, right? Add to workspace is going to give you a list of all the workspaces that are available to you, and in here you find that particular workspace where you want to add this page to. And it says up here that this was indeed added to the MS Loop Lecture 6 workspace. I can go open from here and it's going to take me straight to that page. However, what happened here is it did not copy that page. It created a link to that page, and you can see here the link is denoted by this little hyperlink icon on top of the loop page image. As you can see here, this is embedded or created within the workspace, whereas this one here is linked to the source page that is in a different workspace. So how do you make this one permanent? How do you copy it? The way to go about it is you click on that ellipsis and say duplicate. And what is going to happen there is it's going to create a physical copy of the source content in this workspace. But because names are supposed to be unique, you will see it appended a number 2 into it to differentiate it from the link that's here. And you can see the hyperlink icon is not on this one. And once I'm done doing that, I can get rid of this one. Deleting this is just deleting the link to the source document, because whatever changes I would make here in the linked one would be reflected in the source. So be cognizant of that. Unless that's your intention, then don't modify the linked page. So I'm going to get rid of this one, and I'm going to go ahead and rename this to be the full name minus the number that was added for me, right? And then I am going to go ahead and drag this and drop it on top of that. What this does is it makes it into a sub page of the higher one. Now, one thing to note is there is only a maximum of 5 sub pages available, 5 levels available. So when you're dragging and dropping something up here, if it is more than 5 in depth, it will not work for you. Meaning, if I were to go create a page here, and I'm gonna go ahead, and that's another thing to be aware of. When you add a new page, it is gonna go to the very top. Beware of that, especially if you're scrolling in a bunch of pages that are in here. That is where it's gonna land. So if I were to go in here, add a new sub page, and then add a new sub page to that, and then one final sub page here, and I'm gonna call this maxed, and try and this is going to work because it's still 4. I'm going to go ahead and add one more sub page. You can see here I've got root child 1, child 2, child 3, child 4, if I were to try and drop it on top of this one, it's not going to work. There is no rectangle drawn around the mastering Microsoft Loop for PM's page. So you cannot make an entire tree of pages that are nested if they have maxed the number of children or subpages. So if I were to get rid of this level and then drag this one on top of this, you can see I've got that rectangle, which allows me to make it into child of this particular one. So that's a really important aspect. It can be frustrating. I had to learn it the hard way. I am a tinkerer. I like to learn by doing, and I only RTFM if I have to. In this case, I'm gonna just delete this because I think the point is made. Coming back to the content which I just ingested from the other workspace, and I'm going to show you the process of designing course outline. That's my process. Obviously, it's not universal. As you can see here, I went through the thinking process, iterated through it. I published this on Canvas for our project managers, which is an LMS, learning management system, if you care. So I go through the process of designing and typing and so on and formatting, and this was ready for publishing. So you can see here, introduction to Loop included an overview, what are the key features, what are the benefits, and so on and so forth. And I organized that into collapsible regions, as you can see, and then drill down a little bit into what are the benefits and features and so on. And then I planned a demo and I wrote some notes for myself, and then a lab for the attendees so they can go play around and exercise their newly acquired skills, right? So that is module 1, and then I created module 2 that goes through I clicked on the wrong one here. Collapse. Module 2 and module 2 down here. It's expanding both for me for some reason. I'm going to go close that. So module 2 here has collaboration tools, real-time editing and comments, etc., etc., right? One that I'm really excited about, and I use it extensively in my documentation because in my day job I am a technical guy and I write a lot of technical documentation. For that I use what we call mermaid diagrams. I'm going to discuss that in detail later on, but this is an example of how you can create and organize your content within a page. And how did I add these? I just started typing, and for the mermaid diagrams, in case you are as excited about it as I am and want to jump right in, basically, by the way, those indented bullet points, you can just enter, just gonna exit out of that. If I were to go / there, or the plus sign, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, and you start typing mermaid, you can see that you can add a mermaid diagram in there. Now this requires a bit of learning of a new syntax, granted, but this is diagramming by code, which is really a powerful way to do it. It's very simple. I'm gonna have a little bit of a demo on that later on, right? So that is in a nutshell how I organize my content, shuffle things around between workspaces, tweak the presentation for myself and for the end users as well. If I was sharing this as a Loop component with my collaborators, my colleagues, I would share the entire workspace from a share button up here on the right. I can share a page link to this particular page, or I can turn the whole page into a Loop component and send it to my collaborators, either using Outlook or Teams, as you have seen before if you attended my sessions, or I'll just walk through it real quick here. You can specify who has access to it, and if you specify individuals, then you can also give them specific permissions. Furthermore, you can set an expiry date on that. I'm not going to do that. There are no secrets here. This is open to my entire organization, so I'm going to go ahead and leave it at that. And what happens here is component is created behind the scenes, and a link, the actual component is packaged and loaded into the clipboard for me to go and post it to a team or through a DM. If I put it in a post here in the general channel and I say Control V or paste, voila, it's going to bring that component through a clipboard and paste it in here. The rendering is happening in MS Teams, as you can see. So MS Teams is a native client for Loop components, right? And so is Outlook. If I were to go and create a new message here and in the message body, I paste that, Control V again, as you would expect, is rendering it, and I can send it to my collaborators over here, and they will receive the exact same thing. I should add a subject, Loop course for PMs, and I'll hit the send button, and that is gonna go ahead and send it to that person, right? And that is how you create a Loop page, turn it into a component, and share it with your teammates in order for them to be able to use it, right? And I'm gonna post it here so that everyone in this channel will be able to access it and collaborate on it. And of course, what I mean by collaborate on it is they can literally go in here and modify it within this chat. So if I say someone would come in here and say, I don't like this, we should have a title over here, great work, Adam, and I suggest right now, if I were to just leave that and go back to Loop, you can see the changes were reflected instantaneously there. And that's really the power of Loop. You create a component, no issues with multiple copies being created, no issues with people inadvertently modifying a copy, thinking that they're working on the original. All that stuff is gone. It's all centralized here. And not only that, unlike Word, for example, where you have to have Word, licensing is a non-issue here, but you have to have Word, the client, in order to modify the document, right? Whereas here, within whatever client you are chatting within or emailing back and forth, you can simply go ahead and modify the document within that message, or within that tool rather, and it's going to be reflected. This is an email, it's going to be reflected in the source immediately, right? So I'm going to go back here, and you can see an email was added there as well. They don't have to respond to my message and send me their comments, and then I have to incorporate those comments. All that is gone. As you can see, it really gives agency to the recipients to immediately act on the item itself and execute their ideas. If I don't like them, I can always go back here as a creator, obviously without being rude, maybe let them know, but they would know that the change that they suggested by entering it directly into the document was undone. And I'm going to do the same for this one because I have other uses for this page. And if you go back, you will see that my changes were reflected indeed in Teams as well as in Outlook, right? And these are just two of the clients, and there are several others such as Whiteboard and so on, where this can be incorporated, the Loop component that is can be incorporated, and the changes will be reflected accordingly. OneNote is another one that is a native client for Loop components, right? Recap then, we started with a workspace. Down here in the landing page, you can go and create a new workspace, which you can do from other places as well. But in here, create a new workspace, give it a name. It's going to bring you in here with a blank page. We can add more pages. You can come to a certain page and say, I'll create a new subpage, or you can create a page anywhere and then make it into a subpage by dragging that page and hovering over the parent. That will give you a rectangle showing you who the parent is going to be. Hover drag and hover until it becomes a straight line underneath a certain page. That will make it a sibling of this page, which means it will be a child of this parent there. We use that family relationships in our vernacular in IT, if you're not familiar with that. And that's what this is. You can delete that page if you don't want it. And that is how you organize your pages into what resembles sections in OneNote. If you are a OneNote user, Workspace is similar to a notebook. And these pages are pages, but a page, once it has a child, a subpage, then the parent becomes an equivalent of a section in the OneNote universe. That's it for this session. I hope you learned a thing or two, and more importantly, you enjoyed it. I'll see you soon.